Okay, we're back. So what we're going to look at now is the vicarious cycle of anxiety. So this is the uncomfortable physical feelings, upsetting thoughts, and distressing emotions that all work together to kind of create the kind of turmoil that people do experience. So in the beginning, we have increased scanning for danger. So this is what we was talking about earlier, where the individual is just scanning and looking and thinking about all the things that could go wrong. And then we have the physical symptoms which intensify. So remember I said earlier that all things are energy. The thoughts start it, the emotions amplify, and the actions reaffirm it. And so what's going on is in their body, they're experiencing all of these emotions and they're intensifying. And then attention narrows and shifts to self. So what happens is the person just focuses on themselves, what they're doing wrong, what might go wrong, how they're looking, what people are thinking about them, how their face looks, etc. All of these things, it goes inward. They're focusing on themselves. And then so the response will be either escape or avoidance. Don't do that challenge, that task, talk to that individual, whatever the situation may be, or avoid. And so the short term, again, is that relief, but it's short lived. Okay. But then in the long term, there is an increase in the physical symptoms of anxiety, more worry, loss of confidence about coping, and increased use of safety behaviors. And when I say safety behaviors, things like avoidance, things like keeping your head down, things like, taking alcohol, things that will help to keep that person safe in that moment. And it's not looking about long-term good. And then as a result, it creates more anxiety. And then the cycle just reoccurs again and again and again. And so how we reverse that cycle is that obviously there's going to be those thoughts and feelings that come. But the first stage is that there will be short-term, slight increase of anxiety, then a decrease in physical symptoms and attention scanning. And this is because of the use of coping skills and that the anxiety reduces to a manageable level. So rather than going straight into the emotional side of the brain, which is illogical, irrational, and always amplifies things, we start to tame that side and remember the logical side of what's going on. Yeah, the reasonable side where we kind of equate and say, look, you know what? When I start to do my breathing and I take deep breaths, it helps to slow down everything for me. When I'm starting to feel this way and I do some mindfulness, it helps me to get back into the right place. So it's those using those coping skills, which then creates greater relief in the ability to control your own responses. And that's what it is. When you feel that you don't have the power to, it creates more anxiety. When you start to realize and recognize you do have the skills to be able to do that, it lowers the responses. And then people are able to confront feared situations without the aid of safety behaviors in that situation. So what that means is when a person can do some mindfulness and breathing exercises, then they can go and have that courageous conversation rather than using the safety mechanism of avoidance. And so it helps the person to reverse the cycle and starts to help them to reprogram their mind to address things in a different way. And so it's important that we all develop our own set of coping skills. And everyone needs to find the recipe that works for them. Okay? If we think of it like with food, we will not, even if we all like the same type of food, we will all cook it in our own individual way. And it's the same with our coping skills. Everyone will have their own coping skills that's unique for them. And it's about finding the best solution, not a perfect one. So let's just look at just 6 coping strategies that people can use. Okay. So the first one is to question your thoughts. So negative thoughts can take root in our mind and distort the severity of the situation. Our negative thinking would always tell us it's much worse than what it is. It would always lead us to believe that we are facing Goliath in every situation in our lives. And so we have to question the thoughts. We have to question and challenge them because quite often it's not as bad as we initially perceive it to be. The second thing is that we have to practice focused deep breathing. So one way you can do that is take a deep breath in for 4 counts and then out for 4 counts. Do that for about 5 minutes in total. And by evening out our breath, you will slow down your heart rate, okay? Which helps you to calm down. So one of the things that many people don't realize, so we have the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, okay? So when you breathe in, it's your sympathetic nervous system. That's your fight or flight. Yeah, that's why when adrenaline kicks in, we have these short, shallow breaths, right? But when you breathe out, it's your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest. Okay. And so when we practice breathing exercises and we take longer to breathe out, we're actually slowing down and causing for our anxiety and our adrenaline release to decrease. That's why the experts will give you a bag and say, take deep breaths when you're having a panic attack. Because what you're doing is driving up your sympathetic nervous system, and they want you to slow it down so that you can start to operate out of your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest. That's why when you do any type of exercise, yoga, Pilates, mindfulness, whatever it is you're doing, it always focus on the breathing because they understand how it helps the body to run in the correct order. So using aromatherapy, so whether they're in oil form, incense or candles or scents like lavender and stuff like that, they can be very soothing. So aromatherapy is thought to help alleviate certain, activate certain receptors in your brain, potentially easing anxiety. Okay, so these are things that have been shown scientifically to help and support people. Another one is just going for a walk, getting out of the space and the place where the energy that is causing your anxiety to manifest. And also is the benefits of walking because it's going to release your endorphins, which help you to feel better. It's the fact that you're going to be moving and be active. So it takes you out of the zone that you may be in when you're just thinking about this thing. So it can really help to alleviate bits of anxiety. And another one is writing your thoughts down. One of the things, there's a really cathartic process in writing things down, especially if you've got things going on in your head, especially if you can't sleep at night. Like studies have shown that when people write it down, it basically transfers it from your head onto the paper, and it actually alleviates the stress and the worry because it feels like you've processed it, you've done something with it. In the same way as talking does something to help alleviate things because it's been shared, it's been processed, it's been spoken about. And then finally, we've got mindfulness. You know, mindfulness, there's so much studies on the benefits and the power of mindfulness and what it does to help us to be balanced, mind, body, spirit. It helps us to be in the present, not consumed and worried about the past and not dreading and fearing the future that hasn't come yet, but it helps us to be present in the moment. And that's one of the things that when people have anxiety disorders, what they suffer is either dwelling on the past or being consumed by what hasn't happened yet. And so mindfulness is very good to help them to be anchored and be present in the moment. And what we want to all do, whether we suffer with an anxiety disorder or just in general, is that we want to develop opportunities to create less stress. That's something that we have to be active in doing. And there's different ways that we can do that. So we can develop a support network and use them. What are the things you do? Where are the places you go? Who are the people you can talk to when you're starting to feel a bit stressed, when you're starting to feel a bit anxious? Accept the things that you can't change. Okay? Not everything we can deal with, not everything we can address. So there's a saying that says, you know, can you do anything about it? No? Then why worry about it? Because your worrying doesn't change the situation. And if you can do something about it, do that. So then why do you need to worry? And so it's really important that if we accept the things that we can't change, life becomes so much easier. And if we accept that you can't control anyone else, you're only responsible for you and you can only influence you, then it creates a whole different game, a whole different playing field for us. But we have to be able to accept the things that we can't change. Forgive yourself when you make a mistake. And this is an area that in the webinar, which I'll talk about a bit at the end, that the next one I'm going to be doing about pain and failure, friend or foe, very much around that, learning to forgive yourself, learning and understanding that a mistake is just a mistake. It's a platform to learn from. It's not something to consume you and hold you back. Like lessons, things like failures and when we make a mistake is meant to be a lesson and not a prison sentence. View your mistakes as learning experiences. Really important. Every single one of us are going to make a mistake. We're going to fail. We're going to get something wrong. That's just an event. It's not you, but it's how we learn from it and what we take from that that we can grow and develop. Failure does not mean final. Smile. I don't know people actually know the benefits of smiling. Smiling actually releases stress. Smiling actually causes for certain chemicals in your brain and in your body to be transmitted that help you to feel better. And smiling can actually relieve pain. It's your natural painkillers. So smile. They're saying, I think it says it takes something like 19, I think 19 muscles in your face for you to smile and something like 36 for you to frown. So even biologically, the body works in your favor for the things that you should be doing. It makes it easier to do. Have a routine and structure in your life. It's a given. Every single one of us. The less structure and routine you have is the more stressful and anxious you're going to be. Prepare for your day. Have things to the best of your ability that you've got structure in place. Don't leave things for last minute. Don't leave big tasks, whether it's for work or things you've got to do at home, to the last minute because it's going to be stressful. And so the more routine and structure we have in our lives, is the less stress and the less worry you have, because there's going to be things that come up that you didn't expect. But if you've got those things that you didn't expect on the back of things that you haven't already done because you didn't have structure and routine, that's when it becomes unmanageable. And another good thing, which can be quite helpful, is to keep an anxiety or worry diary. Why is that important? Because most of the things that we worry and anxious about tend to be nothing in the end. And if you can have written evidence for what goes on with you, and you review that at the end of the day or at the end of the week, and you say to yourself, man, I was worrying about 70 things there, and only 5 of those actually came to pass. That's your evidence, that's your support, that's your reinforcement to remind you when the irrational side is trying to kick in that no, it ain't that bad. And one of the key things to remember is that isolating yourself just gives you more time to ruminate over things in your head. The worst thing to do is to isolate yourself. The most important thing is to seek support and help. Talk to a friend, talk to someone that can support you in that time, because secrets keep us sick. So there's a universal law right? And it says this, that we all get anxious and stressed. Every single one of us, we get anxious and stressed, but in different ways and different severities. The more anxious and stressed we get, the greater impact it has on the body. Just as in the same way, the more exercise your body gets is the stronger your body becomes. Yeah. So it's just a universal law that the more you put on your body in any shape, way, or form, depending on what it is, whether it's for your good or for your bad, is the greater impact it's going to have. And so it's in all of our best interests to try and reduce the amount of anxiety and distress that we are experiencing. So there is a cognitive cycle that I'm sure we're all aware of. You know, CBT says to us that what you think determines how you feel, and how you feel determines what you do or how you behave, and then that reinforces what you initially thought. Okay? But the cycle also goes backwards because then what you think determines what you do, and what you do determines how you feel, and how you feel determines how you think. And people can be bouncing backwards and forwards from this cycle depending on which way it's driving them. And so, what we have to remember is this: if you believe everything you think and feel, you lose your power and feed your anxiety. As I said earlier in this presentation, not everything we think is the truth. But if you believe everything you think, and this is why I said we have to look at our thoughts as someone talking to us. And if we look at it as someone talking to us and someone says, oh, you're really stupid, you would have something to say about that. But when your mind is telling you that, we just say it and believe it and hold on to it. And so we can't believe everything we think because we have about 60 to 70,000 thoughts every single day. 90% of those thoughts are rumination. So if we are thinking that negative thing and we're taking that as the truth and that's ruminating in our minds, of course we're going to be triggered by anxiety and stress and worry. And so we have to be aware and take ownership, govern our thoughts and what we're thinking, and challenge those thoughts when they're coming through with these unproductive statements about who we are. And a good way of doing that, of managing our thoughts, is to think of your thoughts as a radio playing in the background. Okay. So when you're at work, you know, at home, you'll be playing what you want to play. But say you're at work and the radio's on and it's not a channel that you particularly like. And so when a song comes on that you do like, which is i.e. equivalent of your positive thoughts, tune into it, sing along with it, go ahead with it, pay attention. But in the other times when it's songs you don't like, i.e. negative thoughts, you just carry on what you're doing, you let it play in the background and you pay it no mind. But what we can't do is give life to those negative thoughts. Otherwise, we will continuously be tripped up by our own thinking. And so I want us to imagine this. So imagine that your negative thoughts are like bubbles, okay? And your brain is the bubble machine, okay? And my brain is the bubble machine. We will always have, you know, negative thoughts coming into our mind, saying things, they're going to laugh at you, it's not going to go well, you will fail, you don't look good in that, you put on weight, all of these things that the rats, the gremlins, the messages, the inner critic wants to say to us, okay? And we can't pop every single one of those bubbles. But you free yourself by turning off the machine that is creating them through neuroplasticity. And so we have to remember, those negative thoughts are like this. You can't pop all of those thoughts, okay? So we have to turn off the machine. And that's through neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to reorganize itself, both in structure and how it functions. And so there's like four different ways that the brain changes, right? We've got neurogenesis, which is continuous generation of new neurons in certain brain regions. Okay, so the brain is always adapting and learning. That's why the keep learning element of the 5 ways to well-being is so important, because we can transform and cause neurogenesis by us learning new things. Then we have new synapses. Okay, so new skills and experiences create new neural connections. So basically, the more that we develop and learn new skills, that's why every day should be a lesson. The more that we learn new skills is the more that our brain is being transformed and it's growing and it's expanding. Then we have strengthened synapses. So repetition and practice strengthens certain connections. So the more that we practice and we do something, we get better at it, because our brain is adapting, growing, and expanding because of that learning. That's why we have where they say 21 days or 30 days to form a new habit, because you are strengthening that pathway. That's why people stop addictions. That's why people change. That's why people can walk in new behaviors when they learn and understand how the brain works and what they can do to change their past life. And then we have the weakened synapses. So basically, the connections in the brain, they aren't being used as much anymore. They get weaker. That's why, say, for example, things that you learn in school, if you haven't practiced those and you did the same exam again, you probably fail, because those certain parts of the brain, they've been weakened. Try and do algebra now, or try and do something that you learned when you was in school, and you'll be like, oh my gosh. And so it's really important that we recognize and understand we can change behaviors and habits that we don't like anymore by not operating out of that frequency, by not generating that same energy, and by doing other things. So neuroplasticity can result from a whole range of things. Traumatic events. Traumatic events make people keep reliving it, thinking on it, dwelling on it. And then all the time they're doing that, they're reinforcing a pathway. Stress. Stress creates, as we saw earlier, the stress hormone responses of adrenaline and cortisol. Then we have social interaction. That's why when people are around people and we talk about connection and they're connecting with other people, it does something for them, because it also releases oxytocin. Oxytocin is what is known as the love or the hug hormone, but it's developed from relationships with other people, and that strengthens pathways in the brain. Then we have meditation, focusing and being present in the moment. Then we have emotions, learning, paying attention, diet, exercise, and new experiences. All of these things are how neuroplasticity can take place. But there is a bright and a dark side to neuroplasticity, because it says neuroplasticity makes your brain resilient, something that we all want. Neuroplasticity enables you to recover from stroke, injury, and birth abnormalities. You can learn new ways of being and responding to conflict through neuroplasticity. Okay. And in many cases, you can also overcome depression, addiction, obsessive compulsive patterns, ADHD, and many other health issues. So neuroplasticity plays a major role when we want to make significant changes in our lives. Okay. It plays a major role, but it does have a dark side. So neuroplasticity means the brain is always learning, okay? But the brain is neutral. It doesn't know the difference between good and bad. And so what that means is, if we are carefully paying attention to all the things that could go wrong, if our brain is on overdrive in worry, stress, and anxiety, we are shaping our brain and strengthening those pathways for the brain to operate and see life from that vantage point. And this is why it can become very difficult for people when they do have an anxiety disorder, because they are programming their brain to think that way. And so managing our feelings is really important. And quite often I find people fit into one of two sides. They either tend to repress their emotions, which is not good because it creates a whole load of issues, problems, and health issues health wise, or they're on the complete other side of the spectrum where they become their feelings. And the trick is that we are able to feel our feelings and emotions, but not become them. Okay? So here's Mr. Angry. Mr. Angry gets angry about everything, right? He's always frustrated about something. Someone said something, someone steps on his foot, it rained, there wasn't enough sunshine. He's always angry, okay? Now, he can feel those feelings as long as he's managing them and not acting on them. Now, if he becomes this, where he's aggressive, where he's violent, where he's rude, where he's short, he's allowing his feelings to become, and he is becoming them. And this is the same way what anxiety can do. You can be anxious about something and then challenge your thoughts and say, no, I've done this many times. I can do this. This is fine. I'm going to go forward and do it. So you've processed it, you've felt the emotion, the feeling, and you've processed it. But then often people become the anxiety. They become the fear, they become those worry, they become those thoughts, they become that. And they allow that to define who they are. And so for all of us, in whatever the area may be, the trick is to feel the feeling, but not become them. And that takes practice and it takes time. And it takes forgiving yourself when you don't get it right. But it takes also learning from the mistakes. So one of the dilemmas when we think about anxiety is what I call the Darth Vader of thoughts, okay? Because anxiety is like the Darth Vader, okay? The only difference is anxiety is invisible. And so what happens is when someone with anxiety is acting the way that the individual who is being held captive by Darth Vader, which is anxiety, but no one can see Darth Vader, they wonder, why are you reacting the way you are? Why are you going on this way? Why are you experiencing those things? You're a big strapping man. You're a powerful woman. You're a judge. You're a manager. You're a director. You've got all this stuff. Why are you so fearful? What's going on here? Because they can't see the Darth Vader of anxiety that is strangling that individual. And for that individual, sometimes it can be very lonely because the family and friends can't see the anxiety. So they can't relate to what's going on for that individual. They can't see it from that individual's perspective. And so it can sometimes be a very lonely process for the person who is suffering with that anxiety. They suffer in silence. And one of the things that is seen outwardly, but people don't understand, is because the levels of oxygen in the brain is decreased when someone is having anxiety, which is what causes the lightheadedness and the dizziness. That's why people sometimes will be reacting and responding certain ways. And people be like, what's wrong with you? What's going on? And sometimes they don't even know, the person who's experiencing it don't understand that this is anxiety. And they don't know. I say, I just feel my head feels dizzy. I don't, and they're not aware of what's going on. But that is actually what's happening in the body. So there are certain mind traps that people can tend to operate out of and ruminate on when they have anxiety. And this only serves to amplify their anxiety. And the question is the why statements. Why? Why did this happen to me? Why is that going on? Why do I feel this way? Why does it have to be this way? And why questions trap us? Why trappings just keep us in bondage? Because they keep us looking backwards in the rearview mirror. They keep us focused in the past. But what questions move us forwards to our future? What am I going to do about this? What can I do to change how I feel? What support networks can I put in place? What can I do to stop this happening again? And so we have to be using the what questions rather than the why questions, because why just keeps you stuck in that place. Why did I do that? I don't know why. And why does this happen? I don't know. And we don't know. But the what is about what you're going to do to change it, to stop this happening again. And the second one is predicting the terrible and difficult future. Man, some of us are champions at predicting the terrible and difficult future. You know, we got it down to a T, down to the very minute of how it's going to go bad and to how the extent that people are going to talk about us. And it can just run away with us. And so we have to develop a mindset where we are able to challenge those thoughts, because this mind trap will rob you of motivation, of joy, of vision, of peace, and of being able to live in the moment. So we have to be wary of these mind traps that only serve to amp up our anxiety. So what we have to all learn to do is to own the narrative, own the story that you tell yourself. Because whether we like it or not, every single one of us is the creator of our lives. And we do that via our thoughts. Your thoughts have the power to bring about chemical reactions in your brain and in your body, and they determine how you will feel. And so it's important that we change the narrative in our minds. And this over time turns people from surviving to thriving. Something happens to you and you say, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to cope. Or something happens to you and you say, okay, I can get through this, I can manage this. The two different ways you tell and the things you think in your brain will create two different chemical reactions. And one of the best ways to make this transition, to change the narrative, is to start talking about it. Because once you start talking about it, you relinquish the power that anxiety has over you. Anxiety's power lies in people being silent and being fearful of what people will think. And then it causes it to just to be able to talk and ruminate and tell us things. But once we start to talk about it, we take back the power. And I don't say for any moment that change isn't easy. It's not. Whenever any of us want to make a change, it isn't easy. But as the saying says, growth is painful, change is painful, but nothing is as painful as staying stuck somewhere you don't belong. And anxiety, especially when it becomes a disorder, keeps people stuck in a jar that they can't move. They're constantly being controlled. They're like a puppet on the string. And life becomes very hard and difficult and unmanageable when you're continuously living from within that jar of anxiety. So let's look at disconnect, because disconnect is about where there is a lack or no meaning to life, and when people lose their purpose. It's these two things that create a disconnect. Okay? And where there is a disconnect from meaning and purpose, anxiety will always follow close behind. Now, I say meaning because when we think about the word mean from a mathematical point of view, it's when you have all of the numbers, okay, and you divide them to find out, you know, what is the common denominator, right? Now, when people are unable to find the mean in terms of good things in their life, things that are going well in their life, and be able to subtract that or divide that by the days in their life, then it becomes very difficult for them to appreciate what's going on. And when people don't understand their why or lost sight of their why, their purpose, their meaning, what makes them tick, what gets them up in the morning, when we lose sight of those two things, gratitude, meaning, and purpose, knowing your why, when we lose that, anxiety will always be close behind. And so it's really important, if you're working with someone or if it's for you in your own life, it's about being able to find out and recognize the good, the meaning, the things to be thankful and have gratitude for, and also the purpose behind why you're alive, why you exist, what you're doing. Then we are able to manage and cope and get through even the most difficult of days. And so when we hear that, sometimes we might think, oh my God, how am I going to do this? That's such a big task. Well, there's a thing known as marginal gains. And the doctrine of marginal gains is about small incremental improvements. Rome wasn't, designed or developed in a day. And when we're making changes, it's not going to be an overnight success, but it's those small improvements adding up to make a significant improvement when all of those areas are put together. So in the context of anxiety, there is simple things that we can do to help to alleviate that. And if we do these small, simple things, and these are just a sample of some of the things, taking a time out for yourself so that you can stretch, so that you can relax, so that you're not, being consumed by everything. Eating well-balanced meals. Your body is like a car. If your car is about to run out of petrol, what do? You take it to the petrol station so it can be filled up because you don't want it to run out of petrol because it's problems. Well, the food that we eat is the petrol that keeps our bodies functioning and operating well. Now, if you drive and your car takes diesel, you would never put petrol in there. And if your car is meant to take petrol, you wouldn't put diesel in there. And so when we're thinking about the food that we eat, we need to eat the right foods that will support our body in the right way. Then we have to think about limiting the amount of sugar, alcohol, and caffeine that we eat, because all of those have been shown to have an impact and affect our anxiety levels. We have to make sure we get enough sleep, because when we sleep, melatonin is released in our bodies, okay? Melatonin is what is responsible for your healing, for your recovery, and for helping your body to maintain and just be well. If you're not getting enough sleep and you wake up with aches and pains, it's because there wasn't enough time for melatonin to do the repair work that our body needs each day. Your body works just as hard when you're sleeping as it does when you're awake. Being active. So again, one of the 5 ways to well-being, being active is not about going to the gym. It's just about being active, doing things that you enjoy, whether it's a walk, whether it's dancing, whether it's gardening, but doing things to keep you active. Being active and having some kind of physical activity is good for your body. It helps your body to regulate things. It helps to release certain chemicals and hormones in the body that help to make you feel good. Taking deep breaths. Again, I spoke about, about when you're taking slow breaths out, how it affects your parasympathetic nervous system, which helps with the rest and digest part of your body's circulation and breathing. It's about recognizing when you do your best. You see, if you recognize that you've done your best and you failed, you can't ask for more. You see, the inner critic will tell you failed, you're rubbish. But when you've done your best, you've done your best, and that's good enough. And it's about learning what you can do to improve the next time. But it's recognizing when you've done your best. And there's focusing on the 3 rule. So when you're experiencing and you're feeling a bit anxious and you're feeling a bit worried or things are going on, the simple 3 rule is, what's 3 things that you can hear? What's 3 things that you can see? What's 3 things that you can feel? This helps to ground you and get you back in the present. Very powerful tool, very simple and effective to use. So then we have about turning your wounds into wisdom. Now, this is something that can be a very powerful tool that you can use, right? And what it is that you can write an account of your journey, telling your story from the perspective of a third person. Okay. So, what happens with this is that it will help you to view the lessons in what you have lived through rather than the punishments. So you're writing the story in the sense of another individual. And then as you're writing that and you look back, you can actually look and see all that has happened, all that you've overcome, all that you've accomplished, all the things that you faced, rather than looking at it from a place of you can't do nothing. And so it's really important. Um, that's okay. That's okay. So it's really important about looking at things from a place of lessons rather than punishment. And so it's important that we do have a mindset and believe that we can do better, that we can change. And so when we do that and when we start to write our story rather than our story owning us, when we own our story rather than our story owning us, that's when things changes. When you own the story of how you're going to move in a certain situation or how you're going to react in a certain situation, rather than the story owning you, the story that you tell yourself predicting how you're going to be. The stories that we tell ourselves is that we're a failure and we can never do it, owning you. And so once we start to own our story, once we start to take ownership back over our lives, as we start to tell ourselves different stories and think differently in our mind, we are able to overcome the shame of it. And so once you do that, everything changes. Because when we are shameful of things and when we allow that to oppress us and hold us back, it keeps us stuck. It keeps us in comfort zones. It keeps us being the victim. And so it's really important that we learn the ways to take back the authority over our lives and over our thoughts. So now we're going to look at some of the anxiety disorders that people can experience. Okay. So we've got GAD, generalized anxiety disorder. And the main symptoms of GAD is over worrying about different activities and events. So people will worry and be consumed around things, and it's basically common for people with GAD to experience depression. Yeah, because it's just it's a barrage, it's an onslaught. It just keeps going, it keeps going, it keeps going, it keeps going. Then we have panic disorder. So people who have regular panic attacks for no particular trigger um, will be deemed to have a panic disorder. Okay, they can come on suddenly, they can be quite intense and be very frightening. And so people will also worry about having another panic attack. And then that obviously feeds the fire, and it just a reoccurring incident or problem. So then we have social anxiety disorder, which is also known as social phobia. Okay. And in these particular cases, people will have an intense fear or dread of social or performance situations. So speaking in front of a crowd of people or doing a speech. It's interesting. Some people say that they fear that more than death. And so this intense fear, social phobia, you know, um, and it can happen before, during, or after the event. And so people can become so worried about what will happen, how people may react, or if they'll be embarrassing if they make a mistake. So it can be quite debilitating in terms of the way that this intense fear, false evidence appearing real, how that impacts on them. And then we have phobias. So phobia is an overwhelming fear of an object, a place, a situation, feeling, or animal. So it could be tight spaces, it could be for spiders, you know. There's some people who have that phobia in terms of what do you call it, holes. So things that's got a lot of holes in it, it can trigger people off. It could be various things for different individuals. Then we have agoraphobia. So this is the fear of being in situations where escape might be difficult. Okay, so things like in crowded spaces, on public transport, or in lifts and stuff like that. I remember one time, um, end of last year, where I was on the train, and the train, you know, when it gets stuck, but it got stuck in the middle of in between two stations, and the lady just broke out in a panic attack. And it was because just being in a tight space and because the train had stopped and not being able to control what's going on. Once the train went back, once it started moving again and it ended up in the station, she was fine. And then we have OCD. So it can be obsessions and or compulsions with OCD. So in terms of the obsession, it's an unwelcome thought or image that keeps you thinking about something that is largely out of your control. So it's just compulsion. It's like those thoughts that are intrusive. They just keep coming, and they're very difficult to ignore. Okay, and they make people feel distressed and anxious. But then we also have compulsion. Okay, which is when you repeatedly think about something to relieve your anxiety. Okay, so this can be hidden or it can be obvious. Okay, so such as saying a phrase in your head to calm yourself, or checking that the front door is locked. So there's something that someone has to repeatedly do to help themselves feel better. So hoarding is also a type of OCD. So then we have PTSD, which is if you have PTSD, if your anxiety symptoms were created by a threatening life situation, such as a crash or a fire, yeah, and it can last for months or years after the event, even if you wasn't physically harmed. So one of the things what has happened with a lot of the youth today is they're experiencing PTSD because they are seeing people getting stabbed and people being killed before them, even though they wasn't physically harmed, but it's creating these problems and these vortexes in their mind because they're dealing with these trauma. And remember, when we looked at neuroplasticity, trauma is one of the things that can affect it. And so often when people are continuously replaying things that happened, even if it wasn't physically affecting them, it can bring on PTSD. And then we have BDD, which is body dysmorphic disorder. And this is when people have upsetting thoughts about the way they look. Okay. And it has a big impact on people's lives. Okay. And it's not the same as being vain or just thinking about their appearance. This can really be debilitating. And even to the point where people will see themselves as ugly, regardless of how many people are saying to them that they actually look nice. Okay. So it can be very traumatic and cause a lot of anxiety when people have BDD. So I guess it's important that we understand, well, what causes anxiety disorders? What are the reasons behind it? So according to the Royal College of Psychiatrists of Anxiety, Panic and Phobias, they said that they don't fully understand what the causes are, but it's thought that the following factors can cause anxiety. So they don't completely know everything around this. It's still a work in progress. But there is 4 areas that they said definitely contribute to it. One of them is genetics. Okay. Some people are just born more anxious than others. Okay. So you get anxiety through your genes, and some people in their genes, they just got more anxiety than others. The second one is life experiences. So this could be bad experiences such as being bullied or losing a loved one. It can also include big changes in life, such as moving home, losing a job, or pregnancy. So all of these things can create anxiety. Okay. Then the third one is substances. So we spoke about it briefly before. Caffeine in coffee and alcohol can make you feel more anxious. But even with illicit drugs, they have a massive impact on people because they're changing and affecting the chemicals in your body. So things like serotonin is greatly affected when people are using substances, and serotonin regulates mood, temperature, and sleep. So therefore, their mood is going to be affected. They're going to be more anxious. You know, adrenaline, is also affected by substances as well. And when you have low levels of adrenaline, you can have a chemical depression. So, in terms of substances, substances play a key role in terms of people's anxiety disorders. And then finally, we have circumstances. Okay. Sometimes you know what is causing your anxiety. You've got an exam coming up. There's a disciplinary happening. You have to have a courageous conversation with someone. Someone's chasing you down the road. So all of these things, you would know what's causing it, but it's circumstances. And then often in those cases, once the problem goes, so does the anxiety. Okay. Once you've done the interview and you've gotten the job, the anxiety may go, but then you may have another anxiety is, can I do this? How would it look when I get there? What would the people be like? Yeah, so it's about circumstances that can cause it as well. So in terms of treatment options, there's quite a few different ones. So we've got talking therapies. Okay, this can basically help you to find ways to overcome your anxiety by challenging negative thoughts and beliefs. Okay, and you can see the duration in terms of the treatment. Then we have applied relaxation. Okay, so this focuses on relaxing your muscles in a particular way during situations that usually cause anxiety. So when we are feeling anxious, what generally tends to happen? Okay, you get tense, yeah, shoulders tighten up, yeah, narrowing of the eyes, all these kind of physical, tensing up, all these things that go on. Maybe your jaw locks that sometimes subconsciously we're not aware we're doing. So with applied relaxation, what they're doing is relaxing your muscles that you've trained to be tense by when you're normally anxious. And this technique needs to be done by someone who is a trained therapist because it's quite, specific in what needs to be done. Then you have exposure and response prevention, ERP. So this is very effective for a range of anxiety disorders, particular OCD. And what will happen is the therapist would encourage you to experience an obsessive thought and then help you to manage them in a different way. And what would happen is they'll slowly build up, build up, build up until it comes to the main thing that you have your particular OCD about. Then we have the London Social Anxiety Self-Help Group, known as SASH. So they are psycho educational groups where you can learn about the symptoms and how to manage them. So they'll do various different things like visualizations, relaxation exercises, using affirmations and role-playing exercises. So various different methods and tools to help people to overcome and manage their anxiety. Then we have ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy. So this is basically an action-orientated approach of psychotherapy that stems from behavioral therapy and CBT. So clients will basically learn how to stop avoiding, delaying, and struggling with their inner emotions. So it's used a lot for OCD and social anxiety disorder. And then we have mindfulness, so which is mindfulness-based stress reduction or mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. And these basically focus on mindfulness and using that to help people to adapt to their difficult situations with more awareness, with more understanding, which helps to create less stress and reduce the amount of anxiety that people are experiencing. So there's different types of medication. So when we watched the video about panic, and the lady was saying that sometimes it does work, but sometimes even that doesn't work with the panic attacks. And with medication, I think it's important to recognize that it can take time to find the right combination. And, it's not always going to be the first one that's going to work well for people. Okay. So it is a process. But we have selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, known for abbreviation as SSRI. So they're a type of antidepressant used to treat anxiety disorders. So they can sometimes cause side effects such as sleep problems or leave people feeling more anxious than they did before. So again, like sometimes people need to get a combination or a different dose or a mixture of combinations to help and support them. The second ones are benzodiazepines. Okay, so doctors should only prescribe benzos if your anxiety is extreme or if you are in a crisis. This is because they are very addictive and they may become less effective over time. So benzos, how they work is by increasing the effect of a chemical in the brain called GABA, GABA aminobutyric acid. And what GABA does is one of the chief inhibitors in the brain. So it's inhibiting, it's slowing down, it's stopping those intrusive thoughts from coming and manifesting. Okay. And then we have beta blockers. So these can help with the physical signs of anxiety. Okay, they can help to lower faster heart rate, shaking, and blushing, but they are not psychiatric drugs. Yeah, psychiatric drugs. So they don't reduce any of the psychological symptoms. So this could be taken alongside with SSRIs. Yeah. So this is why I said sometimes it needs to be a combination of medications that people may need if they struggle with an anxiety disorder. And that would be something that would be discussed and looked at with a medical professional. Okay. So last few bits. So one of the things that I want us to focus on is about the mind. And if we think of the mind, that is like a ship. Okay. Now, every ship has a captain and a crew, correct? Okay. The captain is your rational, logical, and conscious part of your thinking. Okay. The captain knows where you want to go, why you want to go there, and has a fair idea of how you will get there. The crew, however, has their hands on every part of the ship and steers us, i.e., every part of your mind. And the crew is the subconscious part of your mind. Okay, so we have the captain, which is the logical side, the rational side, okay? But you have the crew, which is all around the brain, i.e. the ship, and that's the subconscious part of your mind, and they're in every single part. Why is this important? Well, because when we speak about the subconscious mind, it is concerning the part of the mind which is not fully, that we're not fully aware of, but which influences our actions and our feelings. Okay? So this crew, this subconscious part of our mind, they're all about the place. Now, examples of our subconscious are our habits, our memories, our beliefs, which experts say are developed around the age of 7, our fears, and our subjective maps of reality. Okay? So all of these things, all of these areas which are part of the subconscious are what the crew are in control of. So there's habits that we have to think negative. It's the crew. There is memories we have when the emotional part of the brain thinks about how bad it's going to be doing that thing again when the last time we did it, it worked out okay. And so the thing with this unconscious mind is that it's very powerful and can, without your awareness, without the captain's awareness, direct the course of what you do in your life. So the conscious part of the mind, as they say, is 5 to 10%. And it's your willpower, it's your analysis, and it's your decisions. But the subconscious part, which can be 90 to 95%, is your belief, your values, your emotions, your habits, your imagination, and your intuition. And so it's important to recognize and understand how this can play out in our minds with what's going on. Because the crew is in control of all of your automatic responses, patterns of thought and behavior, as well as systems and emotions. That's why we can often react rather than respond, because it's the crew that's taking control. It's those automatic responses. But the crew sail the ship by triggering the appropriate emotional responses. So we have these emotional responses, which is what the crew is triggering based on the scenario, the situation that's presented. Anxiety is an emotion, and it is the voice of reason about an upcoming event or situation. Okay? Now, what happens over time is if we are continuously thinking about something that isn't a concern or problem, we are firing those smoke alarms or the fire alarm in our brain of the amygdala, and it's hijacking things and causing us to have anxiety about problems that are not actually a problem. But anxiety, when it's used in the right way, is the voice of reason when there is an upcoming event or situation. Like we looked in the first slide, when a person was going out to hunt, they would be anxious because they may get eaten by another animal. Okay? But once they got to safety, the anxiety would stop. Yeah, so anxiety is the voice of reason. But the crew are always trying to steer you in the direction of happiness. This is very important. The crew is always trying to steer you in that direction. But what doesn't challenge us doesn't change us. And as we know, for those of you who did Live in Your Best Life webinar, that the challenge, unless we go put that pencil into the sharpener, there's no change, there's no growth. And so the direction of happiness is not always what's best for us. And it tries to steer us away from danger. Danger can be perceived as going for a promotion. Danger can be perceived as speaking up for something that's right. Danger can be perceived as even going into a room or a venue that we might not be able to cope with. And so this is why sometimes we have to be very careful of what the crew is trying to automatically get us to do, i.e. the subconscious part of our mind. Every decision the crew makes is based on past experiences. The subconscious mind is often triggered by what has already happened. And so it can be unbalanced in how it perceives and views things. So we must learn to listen to the crew, to acknowledge, remember I said earlier, feel the emotion, but not become it. So it's important that we learn to listen to the crew, listen when we're feeling anxiety, what's causing this, why is this going on, what can I do to change this, what can I do to make this situation better, and then guide them rather than ignore them. Ignoring them is repressing the emotion. And we know that that always ends up bad. And so having perspective is key. Being able to look at it from a dual process of what the captain is saying and where he wants to go, and what the crew are doing and how they are feeling and what they are experiencing. Because when we look at that from one perspective, if we're just looking at it from the perspective of the captain, or just looking at the perspective from the crew, it can seem like that. But when we look at it from both perspectives, we understand what's really going on. And this is very important. This is one of the keys to be able to address and deal with anxiety, is being able to look at it from both vantage points objectively. And so self-care is so important. Taking care of yourself is so important. And people tend to not prioritize themselves or take time out each day for some self-care. People will say, oh, but I've got to finish this task, so they don't have their lunch, or they work really long hours. People, because of something's going on, they won't sleep, or they will eat in unhealthy foods, or they'll drink lots of coffee, or they will drink lots of alcohol, or they would take drugs. They do things that have a direct impact on their own self-care and well-being. My challenge for all of you today is that you make time every single day for your own self-care. I don't care if it's a minute, 5, 10, or an hour. You have to make time for your own self-care, because every single day, the world and people and situations are going to take from you. So if you're not giving yourself just as much as what the world is putting on you, it's only going to fuel your anxiety and it's only going to get the better of you. So self-care is your number one priority, because when you're best, you can do your best and give your best. So understanding menopause. So when a woman stops having her periods and is no longer able to get pregnant naturally, yeah, that's what we call the menopause. And this is a natural part of aging that usually occurs between the age of 45 and 55, okay? As the woman's estrogen levels decline. In the UK, the average age for women to reach their menopause is 51, okay? 1 in 100 women will experience it around the age of 40, okay? And this is known as premature menopause, okay? So most women will experience menopausal symptoms, and some of these can be quite severe, but common ones would be things like hot flushes, night sweats, vaginal dryness or discomfort during sex, difficulty sleeping, low mood or anxiety. This is the link. So there can be low mood or anxiety when people, or when women, sorry, enter into their menopause. Reduced sex drive and problems with memory and concentration, which can also trigger on more anxiety when they're forgetting things that they normally would remember. Okay. So menopause and anxiety and how they kind of work with each other. So the fluctuation of estrogen and other key hormones, okay, in the body can cause the feelings of anxiety or depression. Okay. So this is brought on by chemical hormone changes. Okay. Now, estrogen helps to stimulate the production and transportation of serotonin around the body and prevents its breakdown. Now, as we know, I spoke about this earlier, serotonin regulates mood, temperature, and sleep. Okay? So when the body is no longer able to produce and transport them around the body, this has massive impacts on the woman. And at menopause, anxiety is very often made worse by these changing hormone levels. Okay? So it's because the hormones and there's chemical changing are happening, that's what is triggering the anxiety levels to become much worse in some cases. Some women can develop a panic disorder during menopause, obviously because of all this stuff that's going on and how they're feeling. And it's like relearning yourself, isn't it? There's all these changes happening and it can be quite traumatic. So using relaxation techniques to reduce stress can help to control it. And then common techniques include yoga, meditation, and massage therapy. These are all being shown to be helpful in terms of when a woman is going through those changes. Possible treatments is menopause. For menopause-related anxiety can include hormones, so hormone therapy, antidepressants, psychotherapy, or supplements for better mood. Because remember, serotonin is about mood regulation. Yeah. So anxiety in the workplace. So, work anxiety can be caused by a variety of issues. There could be a whole range of different things that's going on. And it could be any of these. There could be conflicts, stuff with staff, It could be having poor supervisions, it could be working long hours, heavy demands from your boss, chaotic workloads, working in a very, chaotic environment, lone working during this time of COVID-19. It could be a whole range of different things that can create anxiety in the workplace. Okay. So when we're thinking about managing it and dealing with it, there's some simple things that we can do. Being more organized and planning ahead, drinking enough water so you stay hydrated, because when you're dehydrated, it means the brain doesn't have enough water and it has to work harder, so you get headaches and all these other types of things. Effective time management, using your time effectively. Yeah, working smarter and not harder. Asking for help. Problem shared is a problem half. Sometimes it just needs support. If there is a training need, if there's something you don't understand, it's about asking for help. Avoiding work triangles, so gossiping around and about people. It's always toxic and creates toxic environments, gossip. You know, um, Setting honest deadlines for yourself. One of the problems is people set unrealistic deadlines and it causes unnecessary stress and anxiety. So setting smart goals, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. Getting away from your computer. I know we're doing an online webinar, but getting away from your computer. That's why we had a break halfway through. But getting away from your computer, if you're working 7 hours and you're not taking any breaks, that is not good for your eyes. Don't work through lunch. We were given a lunch break for a reason. The government doesn't do things like unless they have to. There is a reason why we get a lunch break, and it is because it's for our health and well-being. Checking in with your breathing. When you are getting stressed or anxious, you will start to take shorter breaths. Remember, longer breaths, especially when you're breathing out, help the parasympathetic nervous system. Take 5 minutes mindfulness or meditation breaks while you're at work. It won't kill you. It won't mean that your workload is going to become unmanageable, but it will help you to feel better. Just 5 minutes. Stay connected and communicate with others, especially if you're working alone and from home. Take time out, call people, have little breaks. It's so important. Pay attention to the facts. Emotions lead us astray. Pay attention to the facts and don't believe everything your mind tells you. Access resources where they're available and address situations and concerns straight away. If you leave it longer to fest, if you try to avoid it, remember we spoke about the anxiety cycle, avoidance, brief relief, greater anxiety, more problems. So try to address things straight away. And so this is a lifelong journey of learning. The more that you are aware, the more you understand, the more you are clear in your thinking and what you can do to change it, is the better you become. Little by little, a little becomes a lot. And the little changes you make can become great changes. Yeah. So that's why we're talking about marginal gains. It's about the small things you can do in different areas that add up to create a big win. So just briefly, I want to talk about the positive trio. Okay. And it's paramount that we are mindful of all three of these. So the first is discipline. Discipline means having direction and focus. Discipline means that there is things that you're going to have to do that sometimes are difficult or sometimes you're finding challenging. But discipline is what gets you through. Discipline is what makes you keep pressing on until you get the outcome that you desire. And in terms of with anxiety, you have to have discipline to challenge your thoughts. You have to have discipline to not accept that every thought you have as truth. No one else can do it for you because it's in your head and the mind is the battlefield. Motivation, the drive and enthusiasm in what you're doing. And motivation is twofold. It's internally driven and externally influenced. And so with your motivation, there has to be a drive, something internally, your why, your purpose that makes you do what you want to do. So whether it is in the viewpoint of anxiety, is that you want to live rather than survive. And that is your internal motivation. And then you externally driven by situations around you. Yeah. And so it's important that you have motivation along with your discipline, because discipline starts, but motivation keeps it going. Yeah. Discipline gets you started, motivation gets you to the end. And that's why we need continuity, the endurance and the stability to keep going. Okay. And as the balls hit and it keeps going from left to right, is that continuity. Keep doing the things that work for you. Keep doing the things that keep you on the right path. Keep doing the things that help to keep you balanced, less stressful, and focused, so that you are not living and experiencing anxiety continuously in your life. And a simple but effective things to remember is, if you beat yourself up, then you will be beat up. If you beat yourself up in your mind. But if you build yourself up, who knows how far you can go. And so build yourself up each day. Give yourself affirmations. Have your anchoring thoughts to keep you balanced and in the right place you need to be. Have some time for self-care every day so that you can be built up. This is just some resources of support that people can use. So they will be in the handout that I'll send out afterwards, but you've got Anxiety UK, Mind, Rethink Mental Illnesses, Samaritan, Sane, and there is an anxiety self-help guide which you can get from the NHS. So there's all these different resources that are available for you or someone who you know of who may be suffering with anxiety. And just always remember the silver lining. The sun always shines after the storm. There is always a better and brighter ending when you're in the dark times and periods when you may be experiencing anxiety, stress, and worry. So just some last few bits before I get to the Q&A is, for those of you who don't know about it, this is my YouTube channel, Ezra, A.K.A. Voice of Reason. I have a whole range of different webinars and talks and things that I've done on this page. So I will be posting this on there, but it will only be available for you lot because you paid to watch this. So it will come up on there, but no one else will be able to access it. Only you who have the link, which I'm going to send out afterwards. Okay. But there's also a whole range of other stuff that you can look at on there at your own leisure. So this is the part where I always ask for your help and assistance. If you found this useful and you like this, please take a screenshot or a picture on your phone and then post it on any of your social media channels, just to highlight and share that you found this useful. It'll be good so that others can hear about it and know about it. And if they do need support around it, they can get in touch with me. But an important message for you to remember is, never forget the lesson you were meant to learn. So you were meant to remember when you lost the game. So anytime it doesn't go according to plan, anytime it goes south, when you get it wrong, when it doesn't work out, remember the lesson that you were meant to learn in losing that game, in not getting it right, in not passing that interview. Whatever it is, learn the lesson. That's the key part. So this is my details. If anyone wants to get in touch with me or sign up to any of my social media stuff, I do post motivational stuff on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and via my WhatsApp group, which is Edifying Principles. So I post motivational messages every Monday. I'll send out the information in the email afterwards. If you want to sign up to that, just send me your number and I will add you to it. So let's look at a brief summary of what we covered today. So we looked at the signs and symptoms of anxiety, and these are just some of those. We looked at the impact on the brain. So we looked at the emotional brain, which is 5 times faster than your logical brain. And we spoke about the amygdala hijack, which is when the fire alarms keep going off in your mind, even when there isn't any present danger. We looked at panic attacks and how they can come on very quickly and for no apparent reason. They can be very frightening and distressing. But as I said, the first one is always the worst because it's unexpected and unknown. Then we looked at the precarious cycle, and we broke down about how we can change it and use coping skills to reduce anxiety to manageable levels. We looked at different types of coping strategies that people can use: questioning your thoughts, deep breathing, aromatherapy, mindfulness, and worry diaries. We looked at the different types of anxiety disorders, and we examined 8 of them, and what it entails and how it does impact on individuals. We looked at treatment options: talking therapies, applied relaxation, exposure and response prevention, and ACT. And then we looked at coping mechanisms at work, things you can do: staying hydrated, asking for help, being organized, using mindfulness, connecting with others, setting realistic deadlines. Simple things that you can do to help you to cope and manage at work. And then finally, we looked at menopause and what the reason is and how it does impact on women.